All right, so welcome to the Holy Bible study for Genesis chapter 43 today. We are still in the narrative of Joseph. We're drawing towards the end of it here. Now, Joseph was one of Israel's 12 sons. His brothers sold him into bondage into Egypt. He became a slave, and then he became a servant, and then he was put in prison. And then he was taken out of prison and he was made second in charge of all of Egypt. So Joseph's had a very interesting, eventful life so far. Last when we left him, his brothers were reunited with him per se, but they don't know it's him yet. Because obviously now he looks like an Egyptian. He probably shaved his head. He doesn't look like a Hebrew anymore. And the last time they saw him, it was decades ago, so he was much younger. So they came to Egypt during the famine to buy corn. Joseph was the governor, and he was the one who handled all the selling of the food during the famine. So they met him, and he knew it was them, but they didn't know it was him. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to get to see his father and his younger brother. So he told them, look, if you want Simeon, who he had put in prison because he accused them of stealing, he said, if you want more food and you want your brother back, then you need to bring me proof that you are who you say you are. So bring your youngest brother, who didn't come with you the first time. And of course, they asked Jacob in the last chapter if they could do that. And since he already had lost, in his mind, Joseph, because they told him that he was tore up by wild animals, so Jacob thinks Joseph is dead, Jacob will not part with Benjamin. He just won't let it happen. And that's where we left off in this story, is that the brothers are back with Jacob, trying to talk him into letting him take Benjamin with them. And Jacob said, no, not going to happen. So let's pick up here, chapter 43, verse 1. And the famine was sore in the land. So the famine here is getting worse. And it wasn't just in Egypt, it was all across the Middle East. And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, go again and buy us a little food. And Judah spake unto him, saying, the man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, you shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. So Judah saying, look, Dad, I know we need food. We need food bad to survive. But we are not going back to Egypt. We are going to disobey you. We're not going unless you let Benjamin go with us, because otherwise we're all going to be thrown in prison and we all may be dead. Because last time, when we got back, we found the money that we had given that Egyptian governor for the corn and the food was back in our sacks. So we don't know why he did that, if he's setting us up because we're Hebrews, but we're not going back unless we take Benjamin with us, because that's what we promised him we would do. So ask us to go back all you want. It's not going to happen until you let Benjamin go with us. If you will send our brother with us, Judah said to Jacob, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, you shall not see my face, speaking to Joseph, except your brother be with you, speaking of Benjamin. And Israel said, Israel obviously is Jacob, wherefore dealt you so ill with me, as to tell the man whether yet you had a brother? So Jacob's mad at them now, saying it's their fault. They should have never mentioned Benjamin in the first place. And they said, the man asked us straitly of our state and of our kindred, saying, is your father yet alive? Have you another brother? And we told him according to the tenor of these words, could we certainly know that he would say, bring your brother down? And Judah said unto Israel his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. So I've mentioned in previous studies, a lot of people, after reading that narrative of Judah, where he had slept with his stepdaughter after his son had passed away, obviously unknowingly, so he didn't willingly do it, but still, it was wrong because he thought she was a harlot. people would say, well, how can Jesus stem from that guy from Judah? I mean, there were other brothers. He could have stemmed directly from Joseph. Why did God choose Judah? And I explained in the past because God took one of the worst sinners out of the 12 children of Israel, of Jacob, to bring forth the Messiah of all of Israel's children, of all poor sinners of this world. So it makes sense in God's divine plan. But also, Judah redeemed himself, because the first time he did is when they were going to actually kill Joseph. A lot of his wild brothers were going to kill him. Judah was the one who stood up and said, no, let's sell him off into Egypt. So this way, Joseph would still live, but obviously it's still a bad thing. You know, you don't want to sell your brother off as a slave, but he was doing it to save Joseph's life. Now, number two, we're going to find here that Judah is the one who puts his own life on the line. He's going to say, look, if I don't bring Benjamin back to you, then his blood be upon my head. So Judah's basically saying, Dad, you can slay me. You can slay my children if I don't bring Benjamin back to you. So first, Judah stood up for Jacob's beloved son Joseph. Now he's going to stand up and defend Jacob's beloved son Benjamin, who were both obviously from his beloved wife, Rachel. Okay, you shall not see my face except your brother be with you, is what Joseph said to them. Israel said, why did you tell them you have a brother? I will be a surety for him. Of my hand shall you require him. If I bring him not unto you and set him before you, let me bear the blame forever. For except we had lingered here, surely now we would have returned this second time with the food we need for us, for our family, and for our little ones. So now Jacob's in a rough spot here because, yes, he loves Benjamin to death. He's his favorite child right now. But at the same time, if he doesn't let Benjamin go back with them to Egypt, then what's going to happen is all his sons are going to die. He's going to die. And all their sons and their children are going to die from the famine. So therefore, Israel is going to have no descendants. But Israel always trusting in God, is going to eventually give in and let Benjamin go, because he knows the prophecies that were spoken under his forefathers, Abraham and Isaac, and also that God spoke unto Jacob himself, that his descendants would inherit the land of Canaan, which would later become known as Israel, and that they would be as the sand of the seashore, that they would be as the stars of the sky. So he knows that God's not going to cut off his descendants. So if this is what needs to be done, if he needs to send Benjamin in order to preserve his offspring, then that's what he's going to have to do. So Judah's saying, look, let me take him. Let the blame be on me if I don't bring him back, and you can do whatever you want to me. And verse 11, and their father Israel said unto them, if it must be so now, do this. Take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels, and carry down the man a present, a little balm, and a little honey, spices, and myrrh, nuts, and almonds. And take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, carry it again in your hand. Peradventure, it was an oversight. So Jacob here is going to do everything he possibly can to ensure the safety of Benjamin. He's saying, you know what? Not only return the money that was mistakenly left in your bags, give them that money you were going to give them in the first place, but then give them double that, give them even more this time. Also, take them all these gifts. That way, hopefully, he's thinking he can appease Joseph, who he didn't know was Joseph at that time. And that way, he can appease the governor of Egypt. And that way, Simeon would be let go if he was still alive, and Benjamin would be allowed to return with them. So he's finally giving in. He's saying, you know what? If I lose my son, I lose my son, but I don't want to lose everything. So if this is what needs to be done, it must be done. Verse 13, take also your brother and arise, go again unto the man. And God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your brother and Benjamin. Speaking of your older brother, Simeon. if I be bereaved of my children, then I am bereaved. So he's basically just coming to the conclusion, if this happens, it's God's will. There's nothing I can do about it. And I believe God Almighty there, I want to say it's El Shaddai is the name he used for God there. And the man took their present, and they took double money in their hand, and Benjamin, and rose up and went down to Egypt, and stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, Bring these men home, and slay and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. Now when he says slay there, he's talking about, slay cattle, slay food, so that he can have dinner with them this evening. And the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. And the men were afraid, because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, Because of the money that was returned in our sacks at the first time are we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us, and fall upon us, and take us for bondmen and our asses. So they're thinking, okay, this is really weird here. We're now getting invited to this guy's house, the governor of Egypt's house. This is not good. He's going to take us as slaves, or he's going to put us to death, or he's going to steal all our property and all we have, and use us and abuse us for what we've done, or for what they thought they did. And they came near to the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house, and said, O sir, we came indeed down at the first time to buy food. And it came to pass when we came to the inn that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight, and we have brought it again in our hands. So they're saying, look, we don't know how it got there, but the money we used for the corn to pay you the first time ended up back in our sacks. We didn't do it. We didn't mean it. None of us admit to stealing it, so we don't know how it happened. So we're bringing it back to you. And other money have we brought down in our hands to buy food. We cannot tell who put our money in our sacks. And he said, this is the steward, Joseph's steward, an Egyptian, mind you. Peace be to you. Fear not, your God and the God of your father hath given you treasure in your sacks. Get that now. This is an Egyptian by birth talking about and giving credence to and praising the God of Israel, Yahweh, YHWH, the God of the Hebrews. No Egyptian does that. They couldn't even eat with the Hebrews. It was an abomination to them. Yet this guy knows about the God of Israel. He's giving praise to the God of Israel, saying, praise your God. He's the one who put the money in your sacks. He's the one who has blessed you. What that means is that Joseph, while in Egypt, as an Egyptian, was ministering to those close to him, was telling them about the Hebrew God, the God of Israel. And I'm sure he was converting many, such as his steward here, just like Abraham did with his foreign servants. And he brought Simeon out unto them. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water. And they washed their feet, and he gave their asses provender. And they made ready the present against Joseph, came at noon. For they heard that they should eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. Now, we've talked about this in previous studies. When this whole situation between Joseph and his brothers started, when he was younger, when he was a kid, he had dreams, and they used to laugh at him and mock his dreams. His dreams were that all of his brothers would someday bow down to him. That's why they wanted to kill him. They said, why would you even say this to us? You spoiled little brat. We're all going to bow down to you? Yet, what's going on here? Just as God prophesied in the dream to Joseph, all of his brothers are bowing themselves to him. And he asked them of their welfare, and said, is your father well? The old man of whom you spake, is he yet alive? And they answered, your servant our father is in good health. He is yet alive. And they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. There's another word from a dream that Joseph had. He said, in the field there were sheaves. His sheaves stood upright. Their sheaves all bowed down and made obeisance unto him. And God is clear here. Later on in Genesis, he's saying they actually made obeisance unto him. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin. Now again, this is his blood brother. All of his other brothers, children of Israel, were born of other mothers, whether it had been Leah, Rachel's sister, or whether it had been born of Leah's handmaid or Rachel's handmaid. Rachel only had Joseph and Benjamin, so this is Joseph's blood brother, his little brother. So he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your younger brother, of whom you spake unto me?" And he said, "God be gracious unto you, my son." And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother. And he sought where to weep, and he entered into his chamber, and he wept there. So, whenever one of us sees someone we haven't seen in a long time, have you ever cried those tears of joy? When you're reunited with someone you truly, deeply love, and you finally get to embrace them, you finally get to see them again. Or someone you thought maybe, wasn't alive, and you find out they are alive, and you cry tears of joy. That's how Joseph feels here. He had to leave the room, go into his room, and bawl his eyes out, because he's finally seeing his blood brother again, his little brother, who he has not seen in decades. So he went in and he wept there. He washed his face and went back out and refrained himself and said, "Set on bread." And they set on for him by himself and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with them by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. So the Egyptians sat at a different table. And they sat before Joseph, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one at another. Now, if you're reading that real quick, you won't understand. Why would they marvel at one another? Because look at how Joseph set them at the table. He set them by their birthright. So from the youngest to the oldest. How in the world would this Egyptian governor know off the top of his head, or just by guessing, who was the youngest of Jacob's children, and who was the oldest? How would a stranger know that? So now they're marveling, they're wondering what the heck is going on here. Something is not right. How does this guy know how our lineage is lined up? This is craziness. And he took and sent messes of food unto them from before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs. And they drank, and they were merry with him. So again, now, they know something here is amiss. Something isn't quite right. Number one, they come back thinking that this Egyptian is going to have their heads, is going to kill them and their little brother, and leave their father with no children, and then their father and their family, they figure, is going to perish in the famine because they won't be able to get the food back to them. Instead, they come back. Joseph's steward, this Egyptian steward, blesses them in the name of their God, tells them, "Don't worry about it. I had your money. It's all good. You're fine." On top of that, come into the house. We're going to have a big feast. And then on top of that, Joseph, the Egyptian governor, sets them up at the dining table in order of when they were born. So that's why they're marveling. They're like, what in the world is going on here? What is God doing to us? This is just unbelievable. How is this happening? Why is this happening? This is totally unexpected. And he brought Simeon out of prison, so now Simeon's back with him. So he didn't kill Simeon. They're wondering why he didn't do that since it took them so long to return. But then, did you catch at the end there? Benjamin's the youngest, so he's going to eat the least food. And yet Joseph made sure that Benjamin was given 5 times as much as all of his brothers. So I'm sure they noticed that too. And in their mind, they're going, what the heck? This kid can barely eat a quarter of we can eat, and he's getting 5 times more food than we're getting? What in the world is going on here? Well, in the coming chapters, we are going to find out what is going on here, because Joseph is finally going to reveal himself to them, and we're going to finally have that amazing reunion to just cap off this amazing story, one of the greatest stories ever told. We will do that next week in chapter 44. That will do it for chapter 43. This weekend in the Signs of Our Times, we are going to talk about the enemies of Israel, and then we are going to talk about signs in the heavens. So those are two things we're going to cover from my Signs of Our Times book this week on the Signs of Our Times episode. So be sure you turn in for that. I'm going to try and do that this weekend for you. If you haven't listened to any of the Bible studies before this, go back and listen to them. I got Genesis chapter 1 now all the way up to Genesis chapter 43 here, so you've got a lot to listen to. If you enjoy these Bible studies, please share them with your friends and family, get the word out, because in this day and age, people are just so biblically illiterate, and there are so many lessons to be learned in the book of Genesis for our life today. So I hope you're enjoying this narrative of Joseph. I hope I'm explaining it well to you. And until next week, my friends, God bless y'all and Godspeed.